Welcome to Life in the Feed, a podcast for creatives who are involved in creating content for the internet. Today's hosts for the podcast are Sam Pelkey, the graphic designer.
How's it going?
Camille Durchie, creative director. Myself, Tony Solis, I'm the content producer for Trip Connect, the advertising or marketing agency for the Salt Lake Tribune. Today's guest, over here we have Trent Nelson. He's the news photographer for the Salt Lake Tribune. So Trent, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me.
You've been listening to the podcast a lot, I hear.
I'm a huge fan.
Oh, good.
Nice.
Yeah, we were wondering who our fan was. So now we know.
It's me.
Cue the Taylor Swift, hi, it's me.
Yes.
Just hitting
I'm the problem, it's
refresh button over and over again.
That's
on our
right.
pages.
Yeah.
Where's the next episode? Always ready.
All right. So each week we highlight something interesting that we found in our feed. I'm going to go first. Since we have Trent here, I'm picking kind of a newsy item. Okay. I've said in the last episode, and if you didn't watch the last episode, shame on you, and go back and watch it. Mm-hmm. But I'm from Santa Cruz, California, and I moved here about 3 years ago, and California's been hit with a lot of crazy, crazy winter storms. They call it an atmospheric river, or an atmospheric tsunami, I think is a couple different terms, but they've just been completely battered. And there's down in Aptos, Rio Del Mar area, we're talking about 70 miles south of San Francisco. There's something that we call the cement ship. Its actual name is the SS Palo Alto. It's a World War I concrete tanker ship.
Oh, this is awesome.
Yeah,
Okay.
because other materials were just pretty scarce. So they started making ships out of concrete. This one didn't see any service as far as I can recall.
They didn't know that concrete floated.
You put enough air inside it. Yeah, absolutely.
I just imagine
Sorry, I
it being
couldn't
like
help
an
myself
art
there.
piece.
Yeah.
Could not help myself.
Well, what happened was it was purchased by a company in that area, and they beached it, basically, backed it in, and it became a concert venue, dining hall.
Wow.
They
That's
built
cool.
a pier.
Big shift.
That's sick.
Yeah, so they built a pier that went out to it, and you could walk down onto the stern and then go and hang out. But the problem was, over time, it starts to deteriorate. Mm-hmm. By the time I was alive and hanging out there, it was basically a fishing pier. You could go on just the stern part because that was all that was really left, and fish off the side. And then in the late 90s, they closed it down. You couldn't even walk. You could walk out to the pier and look down on it. You're a few feet away, but that was about it. The storms, however, recently have decided to take a pretty. They made it rough looking. So I'm going to show you a couple of basically photos, some slides here to show you what it used to look like. You can see the cars parked up on that pier that goes out to the stern of the ship. Everyone thinks that that's the bow, that it's front facing, but it's actually backed in. So that's the stern.
Okay.
Right there. So this is kind of about the time that it was just a fishing pier. So you had some stairs that you could walk down from the pier, and you got onto that stern part. And that's the only part you could really go onto.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Looks cool.
Yeah. I mean, it's a great
Picnic spot.
Yeah. The beach
Yeah.
there too is just absolutely gorgeous. And, there's RV parking right on the ocean. So if you're ever driving around and needed a place to kind of, if you had an RV, needed a place to camp, you could do it there,
Live in the
Sea
van
Cliff
life.
Beach.
Man.
This is how I remember it. This is the photo that I took.
Beautiful.
Oh, yeah, it is beautiful.
yeah.
Haunting.
Yeah, so it seemed like a haunted or a ghost type ship. But yeah, that's kind of, they had already closed it off by this point. You couldn't walk on it anymore. You can see that the back end is starting to fall apart. Mm-hmm. And they have that gate there, so you can't walk down the steps.
What time of day did you take this up?
This is a slightly overcast day at roughly noon.
Word.
This was about a 5-minute exposure.
Yeah.
And a lot of massaging too. This was not a news photo, and Trent will know that you can't mess around with news photos quite this much, because you have to depict reality, and I'm not depicting reality. I'm depicting what I had in my head. I was trying to use the Ansel Adams zone system and do some dodging and burning, and the clouds had there was movement in the clouds, but there's also a lot of dodging and burning up there to get a little texture.
This is a digital shot, right?
Yes, this is a digital shot. A couple years ago, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, we had some storms hit it. Actually, no, this is the recent storm. You can see this quick little Instagram video. this is the beach that's been kind of destroyed. There's the pier that has been destroyed, and the stern of the ship has been completely turned over onto its side.
That sucks. It looks so cool.
Yeah, that lifeguard tower too is like barely standing. So I'm assuming anyway that they're going to take the whole that whole pier down.
Yeah.
Shoot. Hopefully they can like preserve it somehow and use it somewhere else in the city. Like I know City Museum in St. Louis, and they would grab different pieces from buildings and put it in there. So it's very unique space to go to.
Yeah, so I mean, these are some photos here by Shmuel Thaler. Hello, Shmuel. He's a news photographer for the Santa Cruz Sentinel. I'm sure he will not mind mentioning him, but you can see kind of out in the distance where the pier is broken and how the lifeguard tower is just barely hanging on.
Wow.
I believe this is when the governor, Gavin Newsom, was out visiting. He's asking President Biden to declare a state of emergency. Mm-hmm. That's kind of what's left now.
And
Rip.
Yeah, and just
That's
the beach is
really
torn
is.
up. Just everything's torn up, and because Trent was here and it was a newsy thing, I decided that this was going to be my thing that I saw in the feed, and it's kind of breaking my heart, but it's also, I mean, it's been falling apart and deteriorating for a long, long time.
Yeah.
It's more than 100 years old now at this
cool.
point.
It's like
wow.
a piece of lost Americana.
Yeah.
It really is. And there's so much of that Bay Area maritime ruins and loss. It reminds me of the Saltaire stuff that you were talking about last time. That's the Utah equivalent,
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Definitely.
So anyway, that's what I found. Sam, I know you've got something pretty cool in your feed that I liked.
So this week in my feed, I saw that Complex magazine had interviewed Rick Rubin in promo for his new book, The Creative Act, A Way of Being. And if you don't know who Rick Rubin is, first of all, shame on you. You should absolutely know who Rick
Shame
Rubin
on
is.
me.
What?
But-
Really?
Once you start talking about them, I'll probably be like, oh yeah, I remember this. But
he's like-
looking at the photo here, I'm like, who is that guy?
He's like the Santa of contemporary American music.
I was just gonna say, I'm like, please say Santa.
No, Rick Rubin has worked he's like your favorite artist's favorite producer. He's worked with everybody from Kanye to the Beastie Boys to Jay-Z to Run DMC, Public Enemy, Johnny Cash, Slayer. You name them, he's probably worked with them.
Yeah, keep it going. How many more?
So many more.
I mean, he's responsible for those last Johnny Cash albums that he put out before he died. I think the American series. I can't remember exactly what they called it, but the very famous song, the Nine Inch Nails cover, "Hurt," that Trent Reznor even says is not my song anymore. It belongs to Johnny Cash. That's Rick Rubin who gave that to Johnny Cash and said, "You should probably cover this."
That's really cool.
So the interview is really nice. It's a really good read. Highly recommend it. We'll link it in the show notes. But it's basically talking about his process in the studio and what he believes produces the best product and like the best way of being creative. And he basically theorizes that creativity isn't like there's no one right or wrong way to do it. It's just kind of a state of being. So if you like commit to being creative, it's not something you turn off. It's 24/7. So his book is he coined it as a philosophical meditation on creativity. I'm probably going to pick the book up. He's one of my heroes personally, just from the sheer amount of volume that he's made and the impact that he's had on contemporary pop music. It's crazy. He is not like a super technically sound producer. He doesn't know how to play instruments, and you won't see him at a sampling board, right? Dang. He just kind of has conversations with artists, and through that they've been able to like revitalize their careers or just completely create ground-changing work. I highly recommend. Like he drops some nuggets in the interview, and it's I would recommend it to all creatives.
I like this right here.
Sweet.
The question is, what do people get wrong about creativity? What's a misconception? And he says it's just fun work. that it's all fun and it's all a party, but that's not it at all.
Right.
In real life, it's dedication. If you do it seriously, it's a very dedicated life, and it's unlike other jobs. That's true.
Yes.
Yeah.
He has white hair from all of that creativity.
Camille, what'd you find in your feed this
great.
week?
Mine, I found a post by Now This News, and it was saying that legislation in Wyoming could phase out EV sales by 2035. So
Yikes.
of all the states, it kind of makes sense that Wyoming would be one of the ones trying to get rid of EV cells, like electric vehicle cells, for those who don't know. So they added in this bill saying that they want to not be reliant on electric vehicles. So that's their thing. However, one of the guys that's in California, Mark Geller, a spokesperson for EV Association, he said maybe we should ban all cars and go back to horses.
Which would be great for Wyoming.
Yeah. It's an interesting state. So we'll see if that happens, because if that does happen, then that leads to other states being able to do that too. So who knows where it will go.
Sets a precedent.
Yeah, but there are a number of states who have like they want to have at least 50% sales by 2050 or something. I know California's got some pie in the sky hope that it's going to be mostly EV sales from here on out, but you expect that in California.
As we talked about last time, the batteries don't do well in cold, and Wyoming is a very cold place. So I don't think that many people are
Wyoming
rushing.
also loves their oil fields. And
Yeah.
I wonder if this leads to like how people from Utah go to Wyoming to buy fireworks, and then they will come here to buy EVs, right?
Yeah.
For their summer cars.
Yeah.
That's perfect.
Just a nice
love
trade.
that. Which most people don't come to Utah to buy things.
This would be the first thing that we have that they don't,
This is
right?
Utah's
Yes.
export.
Yeah.
We got
EVs.
it. More than salt.
So Trent, you put something down that was pretty interesting for your feed.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I found this article on Hacker News that was, the title is, and when I read this title, I was like, oh, this is really interesting. The title is, I record myself on audio 24/7 and use AI to process this information. And I was just like, I've got to read this. And so this guy has this little tiny audio recorder. It's about half the size of a credit card. And he just records audio all day, everywhere he is. And then at night, he has computer transcribing all of the everything he's said. And so he's leaving himself notes, like when he weighs himself, he'll say, his name's Robert, he'll say, Robert, weight 60.1, and Robert. That's his way of reminding himself of the things he needs to know. Or his lunch, Robert, lunch, 2 toasts and a fried egg, and Robert. And
Dang, that's very specific.
yeah, right? And he's like tracking all this info, and then the computer is like looking up the calories and how many fried eggs and toast and calculating that and his mood. And then at the end, he asks, is this the future? And I'm like putting that out to the crowd here. Like,
Oh, is this
Sounds
the future?
like,
Maybe.
man, just get an Apple Watch, man. Like,
It doesn't
what
do
are we
that
doing
much,
But then
though.
Apple is the one that has your information, and you might not
Yeah.
want that. You don't want Google and Apple and these big conglomerates.
yeah.
You know, you said he stores it on his private server, right?
Yeah, so this is all done locally on your own device. But the other thing he talks about as a benefit to doing this, and obviously this person is an extreme hyper-productive data person. Not everyone's going to do this,
Yeah.
but one of the things he says is, now I have total recall of memory for my whole life since I started doing this. He can recall anything he said. It's kind of strange, kind of scary.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
yeah,
interesting.
that's interesting. It's like real life. It's that one episode of Black Mirror, right, where they like have the memory recall and stuff. But I don't know. I just feel like not a lot of people are going to be committed to this bit. Like, it's going to be an extreme percentage of the population that's going to want a total recall of your life.
Yeah.
Like, I don't need to remember every meal I had this week or stuff like that.
Well, when it's like that, what if it were something like quarterly? You would get on and be like, okay, here's what happened. I went to Vancouver. I went to XYZ in Vancouver or whatever. And then that's like you're like doing chunks of memories,
Like
not
vlogging,
just like
memory vlogging.
Selective.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It kind of reminds me. There's a commercial out right now where I think it's if you watch football, it'll be on during football games. But it's a husband and wife. They're out camping, and it's like, you were supposed to bring the life jackets. No,
it's
I
the
didn't say
insurance
that.
commercial.
Yeah, and she goes, throws the flag. Okay, let's go to the replay, and they replay the memory of it. So you'd be able to do that now.
Yeah.
And be like, oh yeah, let's check the feed.
But also, it
With
could be
that-
that's like super heavily slanted because it's like your perception of events. It's not going to be like an accurate retelling. It's just going to be how you narrated it to your AI. Unless you've got it, unless you're picking up, unless you're, recording everybody else's interactions with you too.
So like that psychic could be saying it like it really happened with the murders last week.
Yeah, and then the AI will justify that. But
Yeah.
Watch last week's episode to see what we're talking about.
Yeah.
that's a callback.
Seriously plugging it in.
We've had enough episodes where we can have callbacks now. This is great.
I love it.
Well,
also, it would be a funny thing if it was judgmental. So then it's like, you've had a few Cokes today. You probably should have a little less.
Very good. Yeah.
Those are very interesting. Trent, you win for most interesting thing
really
in the feed.
cool.
Yeah,
Great
you win
list,
for sure this time.
Oh man,
I have so many questions.
thought Rick Rubin had it for sure, man.
So, Trent, you've been here with us for a couple of minutes now, but I'm going to reintroduce you. Today's guest, Trent Nelson, news photographer for the Salt Lake Tribune. You've been with the Tribune since 1995, and I have read recently that you were named the news photographer of the year 6 times.
In Utah, yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
Dang.
Not 7.
Humble
You've been
brag.
here since 1995. Like, come on, you should have more.
I know. It's like every so many years I get one, It's a very
That's
talented
so
crew
cool.
here,
Yeah. Yeah, well, thanks for joining us, man. Thanks for coming on in.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Sure.
Yeah. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? Did you, study photojournalism, and, how'd you get started?
Yeah, sure. I initially wanted to be a writer. I wanted to be a newspaper reporter. And what happened was I went to college to the student newspaper the first day, and there were so many rules about news writing.
There are a lot.
There are so many rules. And then
It's no longer fun.
they were assigning beats to everybody. So like you were going to cover football for the whole year. You're going to cover politics all year. And I thought,
Did you get a bad beat?
no, I didn't get any beat because I thought, I don't want to do one thing. And I looked over.
Oh,
Those photographers are going to do everything. And so I went over and just stood
There
next
it
to
is.
them. And that was it. Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
That's
So,
so
I mean, you had before that, had you really had an interest in photography? Had you picked up a camera, really?
I didn't know what I was doing. I actually got an F in photography in high school because I just didn't do anything.
Just look through the
That's
hole and push the
awesome.
button.
But
That's
I was
awesome.
I was a
Back when it
self-publisher. Yeah.
Actually, like doing film, it's not like now where you're just
Right.
doing Photoshop or Lightroom for a bit.
Yeah, you had to go into the dark room and develop. But I was a self-publisher. I had a zine in high school, so I was writing and taking pictures and Xeroxing it, through wherever I could find a Xerox machine,
So on some people's first days, like Tony, then we give them some really interesting work. What was your first day like here at the Tribune?
My first day here was Pioneer Day, and there's not like some amazing journalism story, but what was funny was back then we did film, so you came into the office. No remote work, we're all in the office, so you'd go out and shoot, come back. And they had printed up in the paper this list of all the fireworks all around the valley. And then, but also there was a number, like, so if we didn't have your specific town, call this number. And they had put the photo department's phone number as that number. And so all day, the phone would ring every 5 minutes. And at first we were like, no, you've got the wrong number. We hang up. Then we realized they just call back. So one of the photographers, Tim Kelly, who was like a legendary Tribune photographer for decades, he got out the guide and he took these calls all day. What town are you in? Oh, you're over in Helper? Well, at 7:00 down at the the VA or whatever.
That's so cool.
And he just took these calls all day. That was my first day on the job.
Okay, MVP. That's cool. Okay.
Yeah. You have covered a pretty big story that seems to have gone a series of stories and photos, and that's the FLDS. I mean, what's that been like, and how do you get in to start covering that?
Yeah, I mean, when I first went down there, it was 2005 in the summer, and Warren Jeffs was on the run. He wasn't a most wanted yet, but he was on the run. Everyone was after him, and I went down. I got sent down alone, and the story was the state of siege that the town was in. How it was so tense down there, and I went, like I said, by myself. And at that time, when you turned off the highway, your cell phone stopped working. And I was terrified because I'd read all these stories.
horrible.
They're going to follow you around. They're going to do all this stuff.
Yeah.
And so I'd stop and I'd see some people working in a field and I'd start to take some pictures. They'd run away and I wasn't getting anything. And your mind just starts to really go real negative. And after a while, I just found this cool little scene and I thought, I'll wait here until somebody rides a bike by or rides a horse by. It's a really dusty small town, and I'm just, my head's on a swivel. Like, of course, I'm just paranoid, but I see this truck coming up behind me, and it's these 3 guys sitting all in the seat. And as they go by really slow, they're all just giving me the eye, like they want to rip me out of this car and pummel me. And I'm like, oh my gosh. They go down, they go left, and they unnerved me. And I'm like, okay, I'm out of here. I've got enough. Yeah. I go down, I go right, and in like 10 seconds, they're right behind me. Oh. And I've got to, I'm like, I'm out of here. I start heading to a highway. I'm like taking a picture of my rearview mirror, like just so you can see these guys in the truck coming after me. And I go down, and as soon as I turn away from town to drive back towards St. George, they kind of left me alone. And I got a mile down the road. They're like, I can't go out on this kind of a note. I got to get something. I don't want to go down on a downer.
Yeah.
Were you actually down on an assignment, or were you kind of?
Yeah, this was an assignment.
Okay,
yeah.
so you had to come. You kind of had to come back with something.
Yeah,
had to salvage
Not
it.
the photo of the rear view mirror saying.
Right.
And you know how it is. You never think you have enough. Like I had. I had enough. I was fine, but you're always wanting more. So I went back and I stayed. This time I didn't go into town. I stayed on the highway, and there's this big farm that's the dairy right there. And I look over, and there's these, and sometimes when you're in this town, it's like you're back in the 40s or something. There's these like 25 to 30 foot high bales of hay with like a 5 or 6 foot gap between some of them. And there's these like 5 or 6 little boys running and leaping across these things.
Oh, wow.
Way up in the, and I'm like, whoa. So I'm like, pull out 600 millimeter lens, and I'm getting these pictures. And so I ended that trip like on a high note, and I was like, oh,
that's
so
cool.
I'm so glad I went back. But a lot of what I realize is like most of the people in this town are just normal. No one's ever gotten into a dangerous situation. Yeah, they kind of look at you, they follow you around, they know you're an outsider sometimes. But what I realize is like a lot of this is just kind of a made up drama to make
just the paranoia in your head. It's kind of And although
course,
you did have a car like tailing,
and I did get chased out of town, no doubt. Yeah, I mean there is truth to all these things, but then I started to meet people, and it's like these are just regular people, the people I was meeting, but what I would do is just like it's a very secretive society, very secretive group. But I just started. This is like 2006 to 2010, like blog era. I just started blogging, and whenever I went down, I would blog a bunch of photos, and I would talk about why I took the photo, what I was looking for, what I thought was going on. And back then, if you had a blog, everybody read it, like people who were interested in that topic. So cool. And so like they just started to, I think they started to see that here's what this person thinks. And he's not down here, trying to, chase us around. He's trying to document the community.
Right,
And that opened a lot of doors. But the other thing is like over such long years, people leave the group. People, the group changes, like so many things change. Yeah. I would become friends with people, then they would vanish for a while. And I know they're still there because this person knows that they're still around, but they don't talk to me for a while. It's such a long thing, the timeline just makes it
But
really
you've been able to
interesting.
establish those connections then so that
Yeah.
you're not necessarily chased out of town. Even there might still be a distrust here and there.
Yeah.
A little bit, or a skepticism.
Yeah.
But, you're not chased out.
Well, and they went from chasing people around to having security cameras that could track everybody.
Oh, yeah.
To now the town is so different that nobody's around to pay attention. It's just a regular town now. It's completely different. Yeah. And it's amazing. I mean, the amount of things that we've, like the Tribune has supported all this. They deserve so much credit. Like all these historic moments for this small town, like just have added up over years. Flash flood where women and children have passed away tragically. And then you see like a girl who's the 16th child in her family graduating from high school. She's the first one of the 16. And like you just have all this heartbreak and joy, and it just goes with you,
What's one of your favorite things that you've had to cover or that you get to cover regularly? I mean, there's a lot of perks to being a photojournalist. Oh, yeah. I mean, the fun thing is just being right kind of in the front row of whatever's going on, anything that's happening, you're kind of
in that front row seat. Like tonight, we got the State of the State with the governor, so I'll be up there in the gallery. Kind of, I have the upper position, kind of looking down today. Iron Man, when we were at that, I was riding a motorcycle out in front of all these guys.
Were you backwards on the motorcycle?
No, I'm not that good.
There's side saddle and then there's backwards.
Right.
I believe I know a photographer who during the tour of California would sit backwards but strap himself on, and he had like 2 or 3 cameras just all strapped to him and with different lenses.
Terrifying.
Yeah,
Terrifying
and he would just
prospect.
be shooting the leaders, and the motorcyclists would just kind of weave in and out. And
He needs a GoPro on his helmet too.
yeah,
to,
see,
like,
this was
really
pre-GoPro, but yeah, now that would be great.
Yeah. No, I've been on the tour of Utah on a moto, and it's like through from Escalante to Torrey. I mean, the most beautiful scenery, and being right next to the Peloton, and these guys are just churning out so much energy you can't even imagine. But just to be next to that and see that is like,
That's insane.
it's just unbelievable. You know,
That is so
such an
cool.
opportunity. Yeah.
Your job sounds so cool. Like honestly, I'm like, that's cool. I sit on my desk and do meetings and make stuff.
Yeah. Well, it's drama
sounds
too.
so cool.
It's a lot of drama too, because like I was down on this last story I was doing where it's in Colorado City again, and it was a guy who got arrested recently, and this therapist was brought in to talk to some of the victims, and I was talking to him for a while, and I was telling him a little about my job, and he said, well, wait a minute, so you just have to watch all these tragedies? And I was like, oh yeah, like I do. Like I've never thought of it that way, but like I have some trauma here. You know what I mean?
Definitely.
Like it's
Yeah.
not all bike rides and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, we spoke earlier about rules with, journalists when you were deciding to be a photographer. There's kind of a set of rules when you're a photojournalist too. Do you want to talk about your philosophy when you're like editing and shooting?
Yeah, definitely. And like shooting is like a lot easier. The rules are just, you're going for reality. And so, and the thing I like to think about is like, so I photographed like Donald Trump's Republican convention back whenever that was, right? Mm-hmm. The photos I'm taking, one person's going to see it one way and the other's going to see it the other way, but what I show is the reality. And so that part's easy. Mm-hmm. You just don't interfere. If obviously there's cases where you would interfere as a human being, but you don't interfere, you don't set anything up, you don't stage it. So that's kind of cut and dry.
Yeah.
And it's funner that way because when you get a good shot in those strict conditions, it's more rewarding than if you did stage it, right?
Yeah.
And then as far as like editing, when you say editing, I'm thinking like toning and stuff. It's kind of the same thing. You're kind of going to show what it looked like. And I think we've come to a stage where there is a little more artistic license. And that's because the software has made it easier to, like film really kept us constrained to what things could look like.
Yeah.
Now you can like bring the shadows out from a photo that before
A little bit more flexibility with
lost.
digital
So
stuff.
I think you're still going for that same goal, but you can have a little more flavor. Like I think all of our 4 photographers here, if you looked enough, you would know when you saw a photo who shot it. Mm-hmm. Because everyone has like a little style, but it still kind of stays close to that reality. There might be a little more color in somebody's work or so forth, but it's pretty straightforward.
Okay.
When you're actually shooting, and you said that that's the easy part, your reality. Are you conscious of what you are excluding from the frame as opposed to just including? Because that could sway a story one way or another.
It's like a white lie of photography.
Yeah. I mean, are you conscious of that kind of thing when you're shooting?
And I mean, some things are more you put a lot more thought into and a lot more care into. There was a perfect example in 2020 when there were a lot of the Black Lives Matter marches through town and stuff. Mm-hmm. And I was there was a few of us there, so I was on the back end of this march where everyone was kind of sitting by the Capitol, and there was a commotion, and there was like this white guy who was kind of making a lot of noise, and they were kind of ushering him out of the area. Like there were the mutual aid people who were kind of getting him out of there before he started something, or someone else got to him.
Right. Yeah.
And so they lead him off to the side, and I'm photographing, like you say, I photograph everything and then decide what really needs to go in. And then I see, as he's led off to the side, like 5 or 10 people who are coming to really do him some harm. Oh. And I'm kind of just off to the side, subtly taking pictures of the scene. And then this man comes and grabs him and runs him out to safety. And I photographed that. But when I looked at the photo, you didn't know that he was running him to safety. You know, the context was so complex. I didn't send any of them in.
Yeah.
And the competing newspaper did put some of the photos of this situation in, and the comments were just awful, you know, because you just couldn't explain something like that. It just didn't make sense, you know.
That's just one of those instances that they say a photo is worth 1,000 words, but it's really not, or at least it's the wrong 1,000 words, you know. It doesn't tell the whole story.
Yeah, and it's like, of the case of like 1,000 people on a march, this is like one tiny element that we don't need to even, it doesn't matter. You know, one loudmouth gets walked away over. So,
one of the other things that you've been able to photograph here are the Olympics. How many Olympics have you gone to shoot?
I've done 4 now.
You've done 4. Wow. So which ones? I'm assuming Salt Lake City.
I did Salt Lake. I did Atlanta Summer Games. In
so
96.
bombing.
Yeah, I wasn't there at the bombing. I was there like the first week, and then I was out.
Okay.
I was expecting you to be like, oh yeah, like no big, I got some photos, but we didn't use them.
Well, not using the photos, that's a long list. But yeah, so I did Atlanta, just a week of Atlanta, and I was young. I learned a lot, but I didn't really know what I was doing. But then I was in Salt Lake. Then I was in Vancouver in 2010 for winter. And then I just did Beijing last year. Yeah.
Beijing. So what was, so you've done 3, I would say, normal Olympics. And then Beijing was very, very different because you were there with my wife. So I've heard all the stories.
Yeah.
And that was quite the journey to get out there.
Yeah.
I mean, you had to do a number of COVID tests.
All these tests.
24 hours of flights. And
at one point, our paperwork wasn't working because you had to log on to things, and we had to separate, in Zurich. And I was like, "Are you okay if I just go? Because I think I need to go." And
so Julie got stranded there for a day, and you went ahead.
I'll tell you, it was, the Olympics are something that you always look forward to looking back on because it is it is so much work.
I love that.
Yeah. But
if you're
when
working
you're done,
it, I assume.
Are kids like that too?
Yes.
I guess so.
Yes, kids are definitely. I love you, kids.
It comes and goes.
Your kids are cool.
My
Everyone
kids are
else's kids.
Yeah, it's other people's kids are like that. No, I did the Rio and the London Olympics, and I have never heard it described quite like that. But yes, it's something you look forward to looking back on. It was described to me, and this is the most accurate thing I thought was it's like covering 3 Super Bowls a day for 21 days straight.
Yeah.
Yuck.
Yeah. It's 16-hour days. You get a couple hours of sleep. I have photos of photographers asleep in the corner in the photo room because that's just the only, or like under a table.
Yeah.
And you're like
That's
accidentally
sick.
kicking them and you're like, oh, sorry,
Yeah.
It's this dude from Germany's passed out.
Shoot.
Yeah. Common scene. It is so much work. And at the end, you're glad you were there and it pays off, but it's like, it's an unbelievable load.
So how was Beijing specifically different from a photographer standpoint? I mean, were there things that you wish you could have done that you just couldn't because of all the restrictions?
Yeah. I mean, for one, like when I was in Salt Lake, we had a prime position. So I always had, or any of our photographers, we had like 12 people. We always had like one of the front 7 spots because we were a local. We were one of the main outlets. In Beijing, I was just one of 1,000 people. So I didn't have any special rights. I had to show up early to anywhere to get anything that would be a good position. And so that was a challenge. But also, the sad thing is you go to China and you can't stay an extra week to see the place. You can't go to the Great Wall. I only saw Beijing out the window of a bus or out of a high-speed train. And so you're taking all these pictures out the bus window of different things as you go by, but I mean,
they're not great.
It's not
they're
the
just
same.
Yeah, it's not the same at all. And when I got home, somebody was like, "What was your favorite meal?" And I was like,
You had the same meal like every
"There
day at the
wasn't
hotel."
there was nothing that rose to favorite. It was all
Like
fine.
That mint chocolate chip protein bar.
We were just locked into that COVID bubble, and so we weren't able to get out. And I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong with how they handled it. It's just how it had to be. It was really unfortunate to go all that way, and then you don't. You're looking out of a plane window or out of a bus or a train window, and you don't get to really see or experience the place.
I know Julie had a problem like being able to interview and contact the athletes just because of the bubble and trying to, like people's schedules. She couldn't just like show up. So that was the hard part from a writer standpoint. Was there any difference from just strictly shooting the sports? Like, did that change, or was it more of just the outside the bubble experience that you kind of missed?
I think shooting the sports was really well done. It was handled like they have photo managers at each venue. All that was well planned out, really good. They might have given a little too many of the primo positions to that elite group and excluded the regular Joes
so for
like me.
people who don't know about the primo positions, do you want to explain like how that's like AP and Reuters?
Yeah.
So,
and it might be like China Daily, or it might be those kind of high end, the most important people.
But the companies pay for like these prime positions.
Yeah.
And
they plan it out years in advance.
So they get to shoot from a better point of view. So at the Rio Olympics, I know in the like track and field, they were the only ones who could be in the center, and everyone else had to be out around the ring. So I was out around the ring. But so if you're shooting, say, like shot put or javelin, I could only shoot from the person's back, but they could get like a long lens and shoot from the front. And it's because they pay so much money, it's Associated Press, Reuters, and then usually like whoever the host country is, they get some special treatment.
I think they have Getty in there now.
Oh, Getty, yeah.
And also these big organizations, like for ski jump, Getty, for example, will have the same 3 people covering ski jump the whole time. So there will be the person up top, the person down below, the person on the side, and they're dialed in. They know where to be. They know all the people who work at the venue. But like I would show up at 6 a.m., and I don't know any of the people. They don't care who I am. And so I have to kind of wing it and say, what do I think the best angle is based on what I've done in the past? And, you're kind of on your own. Okay. And that can be good. Like one of my favorite pictures, I knew I was in the worst. I wasn't in a good position. I thought I'm down below on aerials. I'm not getting a good action, and I'm not getting a good reaction. But then in the end, somebody crashed, landed on their head in the middle of the snow, goes flying, and it was like, you never know. There's a lot of luck involved. So
you'll send me that picture so we can show people.
We definitely will. Yeah.
Nice. You also have some award-winning GIFs, or is it GIFs? I don't.
GIFs. It's a G.
GIFs.
It's a hard. It stands for graphics.
I don't know. I didn't know where your allegiances.
I say it whatever.
I say it like gift without the T.
Yes. Yeah.
I say it both ways, like depending on what sounds better in that sentence.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you do it based on person? So if they're really artistic, you're like, GIF.
That's a good idea. I need to do that.
So what started you doing these? I mean, and how do you win awards for GIFs?
So I started doing GIFs, whatever, in 2012 because I was editing through all these photos, and when you're editing through the photos, you're seeing that animation, right? You're seeing that sequence, and I just started to put these things together, and somehow, like I was blogging these, like I've never really still found any real traction on getting them used in a news organization. But somebody nominated me for the Shorty Awards, and I won. I beat out like Deadspin and stuff.
Oh, wow.
And so I won like a national award for my GIFs that were just like kind of on my website. And so it's always just been something I've just kept up with. Like
natural talent.
I put out a few every week that are like just whatever comes to me.
That's so cool. They're so great. Like I saw these yesterday, and then I went to the Jazz game, and I actually saw you at the Jazz game on the floor, doing photos. But they had some like GIFs in between of like the players' heads or doing like different things, and I was just like, I turned to the person I was with, and I was like, "You need to see Trent's award-winning GIFs. They're so good."
This one is fantastic. So the Nordic
that.
Combined K90 ski jump animated. Is this from Beijing?
No, so I went back, this was during the Sochi games in 2014. I went back through we had these CDs of our raw takes from the 2002 games. I went through and I copied every single photo I took during the Olympics in 2002, and I did a series of these. And this is one I found of like, I realized I had photographed every ski jumper as they came over the top at this one
that's amazing.
thing. And I thought this would be cool. So I went back and animated stuff that I had shot, 12 years earlier.
Nice.
Yeah.
I want these to be on a digital photo frame and just have them around the office, just like going. That would make our office really cool. Actually,
I'm getting all these ideas now because as you were saying, you're going through like in Lightroom or whatever, and you just go through all the photos and they're kind of animated. And I have all of these shots. I was stuck in not stuck. I got to shoot a baseball game, a World Series game, but you're in one position. You don't get to move around. And I was like over a catwalk, like hanging over a scoreboard. So I couldn't move. And so I could only shoot basically home plate and first base. And so I have shots of like every single player swinging the bat. Yeah. And I'm like, maybe I'm going to get one that's, I mean, they're all exactly the same. You just want to use the one like, okay, this was the, one, the RBI that won the game or something. Yeah. But that would be great. Yeah.
How many photos do you take at a game, actually?
Oh, a good question.
Because
last night,
I might have a bet on it. But last night.
Okay, last night, I can tell you because I just processed those this morning. Last night, one camera I did 1,900 and the other camera I did 3,900. So just under 6,000 from last night's game.
Okay, but for Beijing, because this number baffled me, how many did you take?
Oh, I don't have it in my head, but
you
it's
don't remember?
like
I remember
100 and something thousand, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was like 120,000.
Yeah, wow. It was like 120,000.
Insane.
Yeah,
that's so cool.
Yeah. I mean, and I'm sure you've got a process now to just get through those as quick as possible and find the one that's like, that's the good one. That's the one that wins.
Yeah, you have to so we got these cameras that shoot 30 frames a second, and at first you're like, oh, I'll slow the camera down. And then you realize, no, it's like if you had a race car, you're always going to speed. You're going to go as fast as it can go. And so you have to speed yourself up. And so we've learned edit in the camera during the game, during the timeouts. If you look down, I'm down editing during the timeout and trying to keep up with this massive inflow of images. And so you have like that first edit last night on deadline. And then the next day I'll go through and like, what else did I miss? Is there anything interesting to send in? So this morning I sent in another dozen shots for future use. But you just learn quickly to move fast,
I bet. And that was a long time. Like you were like kneeling in that position the whole game. And I was like, it
started to hurt last night. Yeah.
Yes.
You have a photo of John Stockton, a collage of John Stockton that's actually hanging up in our office that showed up on one of our links here, and I'll put it up right now. I wanted to ask you about this because most of the time in today's digital age, when you see a collage like that and it's Stockton all over the floor, it's edited to look like it's one picture, but yours isn't. You're keeping all of the frames in. Was that a conscious choice, or was that because it was back in the film days? I mean, like, what was the thought behind doing something like that? Yeah, and where did you get the idea?
Yeah, so this is 2003. We were on a digital camera, but it was like a 2.7 megapixel, so tiny files. And I always missed that medium format film look where you had all the detail. But anyway, I knew Stockton was going to retire at some point, and so I started photographing all these different ways that I could think of to get Stockton because he's going to retire. I want to have something important. So at this one game, I thought, I'm going to go. I had started to do these composites of different things like a high school swim meet or different things, just playing around. And to answer one of your questions, I always wanted it to be obvious that it's multiple images. I didn't want to be gimmicky. In my opinion, it was gimmicky at the time.
It seems very journalistic.
I wanted it, I wanted it to be obvious.
It is kind of a social media gimmick. It's very popular. Yeah. Especially with, I follow a lot of like designers on Instagram who do impressive stuff like this to do like game announcements, stuff like that. I think it's totally appropriate for that kind of thing. For this is kind of like a memorial to a career. I like the intentionality.
It is a good memorial. It's I mean, it's an art piece on its own. So you're not documenting the game, but you're documenting one person's impact on the game, right? I would say. Right. And something like this is really appropriate. Yeah. And I actually really I've noticed it when we walk by that you can see every frame. Yeah. And it's just always struck me because my brain does not work. My brain is making it look like one photo. Right. But even say like if it were to publish, I would obviously put like photo illustration. Obviously the guy doesn't have 40 twins. Yeah.
Well, and the thing too, if you did this today, a few clicks of AI would select out. Yeah. I mean, you could do this. Yeah. This took like at least 100 hours back in 2003, and the file was almost too large for Photoshop. It was rough, but this photo ran in Sports Illustrated over 6 pages, and it's the largest photo that ever appeared in Sports Illustrated.
Wow. Oh, that is fantastic.
So that's kind of a really cool thing.
Your portfolio is so cool.
Oh, thank you. Yeah,
Trent, thank you for coming and joining us. I mean, it's been as a photographer, I love picking your brain constantly, and so I like that we could share your knowledge and insight with everyone else. So, where can people follow you on social media besides subscribing to the Salt Lake Tribune? Because that's what you should do.
Yeah, definitely. I'm on Instagram and for now Twitter as Trent Head. And I have a website, trent.photo. Instead of .com, it's .photo.
That's an amazing URL.
Yeah.
Right. Definitely snatch that up.
But thanks for having me. I love this
Yeah.
podcast. I love how you guys are just like have such chemistry and fun. And
Thanks.
The rest of the newsroom is so kind of quiet and reserved, and so I hear you guys having
We're the
fun.
loud-
I'm like,
loud
what's going
ones.
on? Someone's having fun in
Because
here.
creative people have fun, and
Yeah.
that's
right.
what we do.
It's
All fun all the
Yes.
time.
Yeah. Definitely never stressful.
No, never.
all
never at
easy,
all.
right? It's
Yeah,
all
it's all
easy.
Easy breezy, beautiful.
That's why everybody
Creative
wants to be a
world.
creative, right?
Yeah. Well, that's all we have for today, Trent. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah.
Thank you again.
Yeah, thanks for
Yeah.
hanging out.
Really fun.
I just want to have you here all the time.
I know.
that's awesome.
Seriously, come hang out with
I'm
us.
just next door anytime.
Really?
All right. If you have any questions or want to learn about how we can help your business create more content, feel free to reach out to us. We're always available. You can reach out to us by clicking on the link in the show notes. And if you found this podcast interesting, be sure to like and subscribe. Smash the subscribe button, as we like to
Smash
say.
it.
That like and
Smash
subscribe.
it. Okay, and until next time, bye.
Bye.